This is a reading of Chrysalis, story by Tom Bradshaw, Rinoa Page, and Keira Hoeferle. Music and sound effects provided by Zabsplat and Pixabay.com. Narrated by Dominic P Richardson. Chapter 3: The Light. Where there are devils, there will also be gods, and even insects have their queens. While extracting limbs from a nymph, it cried out in its tongue for its patron deity to come for them. No such creature appeared, but it piqued my interest. Since that time, I have sought out rumors and hearsay on the matter. What hunter wouldn't desire the head of a god? I uncovered whispers of hidden courts, of realms beyond mortal entry. A people of the wood, no, more than that. The woods themselves, living trees in human form, dryads. From the writing desk of Alistair O'Reilly, 1824. No one bars their way out of the catacombs. Neith takes the lead, carrying Estrella on her back. The smaller woman, despite her previous show of power, now appears shockingly frail. She breathes in ragged, shallow breaths, as drops of sweat bead on her forehead. Lloyd trails a few paces behind, clutching his makeshift club and trying not to trip over the steps in his haste to keep up. Neith is clearly ignoring him, which he's more than fine with. He doesn't want her to take note of how closely he's sticking to her. Even without looking, he can feel the eyes of numerous strangers on his wings. The stairs end in a pair of heavy copper doors, one of which Neith shoulders open with a grunt. A sudden blaze of afternoon sunlight forces Lloyd's eyes to screw up, and as they adjust, he's met with the noise of open air. He stumbles a bit as he makes it over the threshold, catching himself on a heavy ceramic pot with his one free hand. On closer inspection, he sees it's a potted planter. The mundanity of it seems absurd to him. When he raises his head to take in the space, he sees that he's standing in a high-class hotel lobby. Everything is made of glass or marble or metal. People walk briskly in and out, bustling across the gleaming floor. As his eyes trace upwards, he sees the ceiling soars up endlessly, an open space crisscrossed by wide walkways high above his head. Looking beneath him, he sees the broad windows on the face of the building, and his breath catches. The chunk of wood he's holding clatters to the floor. It's London. He's staring at the familiar cityscape of London. He knows these buildings. He could have walked here from his flat. He's barely left home. He twitches, suddenly remembering where he is and what he's wearing. His wings are totally exposed. Tucking them down, he hurries along at a feverish pace, chancing the occasional glance at the entirely human crowd around him to see if they take notice. No one does, though. The little group isn't attracting any extra attention, and now that he's watching the crowd, he notices something. Out of the corners of his eye, he's catching furtive details, things that aren't there when he looks directly at them. Extra limbs, additional eyes, rotting flesh, or insect parts. His skin prickles and he looks up at the window again. There are metal bars framing the glass in a starkly decorative pattern. Staring at them too long makes his eyes ache. A faint tang of winter in his nose. Iron. Neith shifts her grip on Estrella and strides over to a row of elevators, Lloyd trailing in her wake. She taps at the buttons, speaking without looking at him. "Not going to make a break for the front door?" "How many of these people are made of eels?" Lloyd mutters bitterly in response, looking away from her and rubbing at the cuff marks on his wrists. He is not lying. He's fairly certain he wouldn't make half the distance to the doors before being assaulted again, and this time without any tree-like person to pull him out of the fray. But that's not the main reason he's following. He has questions. Lots of questions, but one in particular. One he can't stop turning over in his mind. You could always try using those decorative little appendages of yours, Neith suggests, breaking his thoughts. She darts a malicious smirk over her shoulder. Unless someone's out of practice. This might come as a shock to you, but I don't exactly spend my weekends soaring off the fire escape, Lloyd says, his wings rippling indignantly. Neith snickers a bitter response, then turns her attention to the elevator floor dial. The two stand in silence as they watch it move smoothly from 40 to 35 to 30, dropping at a swift and steady pace. Lloyd's thoughts return to the question he wants to ask, and as he watches the numbers tick down, he realizes his window is closing. It's now or never. That thing back there, it called you an Unseelie. Lloyd glances sidelong at Neith. She doesn't break her gaze from the floor dial. It did, she answers, speaking in a short, tight clip. How kind of you to remember. Lloyd steps a little closer. He's going to have to come at it head on then. He takes a deep breath. Okay, but that's the word for an evil fairy. The elevator interrupts with a soft chime, and the doors slide open. Neith steps inside and turns around, moving carefully to keep from jarring her semi-conscious passenger. Finally, she looks directly at Lloyd, fixing him with a toothy smile. If you're curious, step on the elevator. Lloyd swallows. He takes a shaky step forward, then stops, placing his palm flat on the door holding it open. His wings flicker nervously behind him. Where is it taking us? Neith's eyes flicker, the veins pulsing red. She opens her mouth, showing off just how long and sharp her canines are. Lollipop, you have 2 seconds. Get on, or don't. The coppery smell of blood rolls over Lloyd, wiping away that sickening hint of iron. He can almost hear her heartbeat. Lloyd's wings pull tight against him, and he could swear Neith's teeth extend a fraction of an inch. Lloyd shivers transfixed, frantically trying to decide which choice would be less dangerous, and then something tugs at his wings. Ah! He tumbles into the elevator and presses himself into the far corner, looking around wildly. What? Where? Is it alive? Did it come back? But as he looks, he sees nothing nearby. No one close enough to have touched him, just the doors as they slide closed. Your Alplarsha friend? Neith asks, lifting her foot and tapping the button for the floor she wants. No. You would be able to smell him if he was. She wrinkles her nose. They all smell like rotten sewage. It was likely just some passing puka, she concludes casually as the elevator begins its ascent. They like to creep about. It's in their nature, given how difficult it is to see them. Lloyd's legs tremble. He wants to slide down the wall to a seated position, but he catches himself, instead glancing cautiously up at Neith and beyond. His eyes are magnetically drawn to the woman collapsed on her shoulders. Something about her. Something achingly familiar. He can't place it. But one problem at a time. Puka? Unseelie? This is... Lloyd takes a moment, trying to figure out how best to put it. This is all just fairy tale bullshit. His wings flutter in frustration. Neith releases a snort of laughter, which only causes Lloyd to clamp his wings against his back. Neith smiles up at the dial, steadily growing in number. My, you are observant. Does this feel like a fairy tale to you? Lloyd folds his arms around himself, looking at his feet. Not exactly. And I've read quite a few. The elevator stops and the doors slide open. Neith steps out onto a gleaming walkway, a sturdy golden railing separating her from a 30-story drop. She saunters across the floor. Then do you feel like fairy tale bullshit, Lolly? Neith calls over her shoulder, waiting for him to catch up. He crosses the threshold, pausing by the railing to glance over the edge. Far below, he can see the crowd of people moving, gathering and departing like ants scuttling on their way. For just a moment, he considers the possibility of needing a quick escape. Once he gets the information from Neith, and assuming he wasn't able to wait for an elevator, would he be able to? But no, he doesn't want to test his wings on this. He's tried clumsy little flutters off of his couch at home, but leaping off into empty space? He keeps talking, masking his calculations. So, you must have drugged me, or... Even as he says it, it sounds like a hollow explanation. Beyond that, Neith was clearly dodging the question. Frustrated, he grinds ahead. So what exactly am I supposed to be, then? A brownie? A pixie? Some kind of bandersnatch? A spriggan? He's trying to sound incredulous, but it all sounds less strange now that he's actually saying it. Neith stops, keeping a firm grip on Estrella, and Lloyd's wings flicker as she turns to face him. The veins in her eyes subside to a slight pinkish color, and she's smiling. It almost seems friendly. If I told you, would you keep following me? She asks simply. Lloyd is left unsure of how to respond, but then Estrella mumbles something and stirs, and Neith's smile disappears. Any which way, I have more pressing matters, Neith says, turning away and walking quickly across the walkway. She takes a sharp turn down a covered hallway, her footsteps muffled by brightly colored carpeting. Lloyd starts and hurries after her, furious with himself for trailing after what might as well be a flashing neon warning sign, wondering if she might actually know. Neith stops in front of a door and gives Lloyd an impatient look as he approaches. My right pocket. The key card is in my right pocket. Be a ginger snap and get the door, would you? Lloyd's expression sets. His wings tug against his back and he folds his arms. If you can't set her down for 2 seconds, how about you hand her to me? Then you can get the door. You want to... How dare you... Neith splutters, her eyes pulsing as she shifts around, aggressively placing herself between Lloyd and the golden-haired woman. How about you do what I tell you, and I don't feed you to Jasper and Emerald? She snaps back, her teeth flashing. Lloyd is startled by how heated the woman sounds. It's the first time he's felt he's had any sort of advantage with her. Then he looks over at Estrella. God, even her name sounds comforting. Like this will all make sense if he just says it. If he just thinks it hard enough. Estrella tries to mumble out something inaudible, and Neith gives her leg a worried pat. Biting back her frustration, she looks to the door, then back to Lloyd, her brow furrowed in calculation. When she speaks again, she speaks with a soft desperation. If you enter the room, I'll tell you what an unseelie is, what it really is, and answer whatever other questions you may have that I can answer. Just please, be a good girl and get the door. Be a good girl. Be a good girl. Be a good girl. It's the final, unexpected straw. Lloyd's wings snap out in a furious motion, filling the space. I am not a girl. God, I am so fucking sick of that. You're not clever, it's not funny, and I'm not a girl, all right? Just cut it out. Neith's almost as startled by a sudden outburst as he is. Whatever reaction she was expecting, it wasn't this. He's breathing hard, glowering at her for emphasis. Then, almost as much to her surprise, his wings lower, and he steps forward, adopting an acrid expression. He extends a hand, and she turns and nods to her side pocket. Steeling himself for whatever he might find, he reaches into Neith's jacket. As soon as he feels something, his hand closes around it, and he snatches out and inspects the key he retrieved. It's a mundane rectangle of plastic, just like the rest of the hotel. just like the city outside. It's so ordinary, it's crushing. Bitterly, Lloyd turns and swipes the card through the lock, feeling a little dizzy. His shoulders sink as he hears the mechanical clunk of the door, and turning the handle, he opens the way into the room. Neith immediately pushes her way past him, knocking him into the partially open door in her haste. Recovering, he watches her rush ahead, but tarries a moment to take in the space. The faint tug of hopelessness displaced by a prickle of interest. It certainly looks the part of an expensive hotel room, or, more accurately, an expensive hotel suite. The main floor is spacious, lavishly furnished with pristine white couches, armchairs, and a rough-hewn mahogany table. A wide set of double doors opens into the master bedroom, and a spiral staircase leads up to a second-floor loft. The ceiling vaults overhead, at least 2 stories, maybe 3, and the outer wall has twin enormous panes of tinted glass, with a commanding view of the balcony, and beyond it, the city far below. That's where Neith is headed, shouldering open the door. There's a gusty breeze of city air that blows in as she does, but she doesn't pause, heading straight for a sunken pool of clear water set in the very center of the balcony. Without knowing quite what to do with himself, Lloyd follows. The breeze tugs at him, and makes his wings ripple as he steps out into the open air, his hair tussling in the draught. He gives the edge of the balcony a speculative glance. Beyond the golden railing, the drop is dizzying. It might be the same distance as it was to the lobby, but outside in the cool wind, seeing the cars and lights spread out below him, it feels completely different. Lloyd steps back from the edge, shuddering. His wings flutter behind him, but he dismisses the idea even faster than he had inside the hotel, unable to shake the image of what would have happened if he couldn't manage his wings. He is distracted from the thought by a quiet splash and a faint, musical hum. Just ahead of him, Neith wades up to her hips in the pool, the frailer woman tucked safely in her arms. As far as he can tell, the water itself is the source of the melodic resonance, reacting to the presence of the 2 women. As Estrella's foot brushes the surface, the water's hum shifts into flowing music, and it emits a brilliant burst of golden white light. The woman's hair turns the same color, and she lets out a soft sigh. Lloyd can see her starting to breathe a little more easily. After a moment, Neith sets her down on the steps as the light fades to a steady glow, pulsing in time with the music. After making sure Estrella is comfortable, Neith sits heavily on the pool ledge, and rests her elbows on her knees. "You daft little fool," she huffs, shaking her head with a smile. Lloyd stares, mesmerized by the light playing over his face. "What's she doing?" Neith turns her head, smirking over her shoulder. "That's right. You have a series of questions, and I do believe I promised some answers." She lifts her hand and holds up her index finger. "Unsili are fae that hunt other fae for profit, or thrill. Either or, really. I see no reason not to do both." Then, a second finger goes up. "Where the elevator took us is the Verdant penthouse, one of several exclusive lodgings at the Spectral Suites." Lloyd folds his arms, listening to her as she goes through the list. Neith continues to 3 and 4. "No, I did not drug you. And Lady Estrella is restoring her source. This water has come all the way from her court springs in the Ebony Wilds for that express purpose." She looks at her thumb, regarding it for a moment. "As for what you are, well, I'm afraid that's something that only you know, Lolly." Lloyd snorts. She has to be doing this on purpose. He glances over at Estrella, turning over everything he's just been told, summarizing it internally and externally. "So, Miss Fairy Bigshot Estrella handed you a bag of money to go and bring someone with moth wings to a fancy exclusive penthouse dungeon. Thanks for filling me in. You're very helpful." he mutters sarcastically. He glances over his shoulder to a door behind him, leading back to the hotel lobby. Not seriously considering making a break for it, but wanting to keep it as an option. So, what's next on the list? Are there wishes involved? Should I be leaving you a bowl of cream on the hearth? I wouldn't complain if you did, she shrugs. Lloyd's wings snap irritably. He knows losing his temper isn't going to help matters, but he's feeling so overwhelmed, so dizzyingly confused that he's not sure he cares. All right, then. In that case, I'll be on my way to pick some up from the market. Something splashes, and both of them turn their attention back to the pool. Estrella's eyelids are fluttering, and she's sitting up a little straighter. Her eyes have gone the same color as her hair. If anything, the glow is more intense. Lloyd swallows, his throat suddenly dry, his anger forgotten. Estrella. Even before she had passed out, she hadn't seemed all there. Maybe she doesn't even know how he got in that cage. He might be able to reason with her. And she's certainly easier to talk to than... Neith? Estrella puts a hand on the lip of the pool, steadying herself as she looks at the taller woman. Neith nods encouragingly, then points. It takes a moment for Estrella to make sense of the gesture. Slowly she turns and faces Lloyd, looking him up and down. He gives her a wary smile and lifts his hand in a careful greeting. You're here. I wasn't sure if that was a dream. I'm sorry for what happened. You know I'm not supposed to use my power outside the wilds. I have so many questions for you. She stops, squinting at Lloyd. Wait. Is that... Your glamour isn't working at the moment, is it? You don't have the shimmer, which means... Estrella's eyes widen, and she takes a quick step back, sloshing in the water. Losing her footing, she falls backwards, and her head disappears under the surface. Lloyd and Neith both leap up in alarm, but before anyone can do anything, she emerges, coughing and spluttering out an astonished question. You're a boy? Lloyd is momentarily confused, then begins to nod frantically as he realizes what she said, raising both of his hands again. Yes, I am. And whoever you're looking for isn't, right? Water sloshes as Estrella wades through the pool, looking back and forth between Lloyd and Neith. Had she actually been confused? The thought brings an embarrassed flush to Lloyd's cheeks. Regardless, maybe this could help him convince her to disentangle him from whatever business she was up to. If she's looking for some moth-winged girl, then she's not looking for Lloyd after all. Is this really her? Are you sure we didn't get the wrong person? Estrella asks. Lloyd can hear the dismay in her voice, and the pang of guilt twists his stomach in knots. Neith stands up and stretches, using the gesture to nonchalantly grab Lloyd's wing. His face goes red as she draws it open. He feels it flickering in her grip. Stop that! He scowls, trying ineffectively to pull away. Neith ignores him completely, instead tracing over the wing's eye spot with the tip of her finger. She has the mark of your court, she says, then leans in close. Lloyd's free wing cringes against him as her cheek presses against his neck. She slides up against his face, inhaling through her nose while he tries to scrunch away. Neith chuckles darkly. And she smells exactly like the dress you showed me, which is to say, delicious. She finally lets go of Lloyd's wing, and he pushes her back, his heart hammering in his chest. Neith smirks and stops a few inches away, tilting her head as she observes him. Lloyd snaps his wings closed and backs up. Look, I don't know who you are or who you're looking for, but it's not me. He holds up an open hand, trying to keep his fingers from trembling. Estrella's slowly getting out of the pool, turning her head like she's observing him. Her hair is still glowing. It's hard for him to focus on anything else. Lady... Lloyd swallows. Lady Estrella? Is that right? She smiles, stopping in front of him. That seems like a good sign. Lloyd smiles back, watching the water fall from her in tiny droplets. The light coming off of her turns each one into a tiny jewel. He can feel his words starting to slow, to disintegrate into their component syllables. I'm sorry. Whoever... Estrella's hand brushes against his cheek. Lloyd draws in a shallow, startled breath. He can feel the light in her now, flowing out from her touch to suffuse his skin. He's completely unprepared for when she kisses him. Lloyd freezes, shocked and unsure how to respond, that hazy radiance spreading through his entire body. His wings flick out, then thrum, humming gently behind him and sending a soft breeze around the two of them. Estrella's breath hitches in his mouth, and her other hand comes up, gripping the side of his neck. Before he knows what's happening, she's aggressively pushing forward, backing him up against a pillar. Her hands are everywhere, on his face, inside his jacket, leaving pinpricks of warmth wherever they touch. His head swims. Glowing silver-gold motes dance in his vision. The light washes over him. It's overwhelming. It's terrifying. Lloyd starts to struggle, gently at first, trying to push Estrella away. He needs to break free so he can stop his spinning head, just for a moment. She growls softly and yanks him closer, her teeth on his lip. Lloyd inadvertently gasps against her mouth, his eyes widening, his ears ringing. Get off! And shoves. It's more forceful than he intends. Estrella stumbles back, not angry, just confused. What's wrong? Her foot slips on the edge of the pool. Neith lunges to grab her, but it's too late, and both women splash back into the water. Lloyd stands in stunned silence, his wings flared out behind him, and his market jacket askew. The world seems darker than it did a moment ago, colder. Then, all at once, everything snaps back into focus. He turns and scrambles into the hotel room, slamming the door shut behind him. Outside, the water churns as Neith explodes out of it, one hand furiously grabbing the stone edge, her eyes seething pools of crimson. Lloyd fumbles at the door. There's no latch. He grabs the closest chair and shoves it in the way, backing away until he bumps against the table. He risks a quick look. It's supported by a selection of heavy ceramic bowls. He snatches up the closest one and turns, just in time to see Neith at the doorway. She pushes, and he watches the chair bending, snapping, then skipping aside. And all that's between him and her is space. Lloyd raises his improvised weapon. Stay away from me! Neith snorts dismissively, stepping over the remnants of the chair. Lloyd hurls the bowl, and her hand flicks up lightning fast, snatching it out of the air. She lets the moment hang, then drops the bowl delicately behind her, letting it shatter on the floor. Lloyd scrabbles past the table, backing away as Neith's mouth splits into a sharp-fanged smile. Naughty, naughty, you spicy licorice bit. Neith digs into her jacket pocket, then frowns, digging further. Her expression goes almost blue with horror. No. When Neith's hand comes out, it's covered in crimson stains and half-dissolved granulates of colored sugar. The mess drips between her fingers, forming little rivulets that hiss and splatter across the floor. A nervous snicker bursts out of Lloyd's mouth before he can stop himself. Neith's head snaps up, and his mouth clamps shut. Her eyes swirl into the pulsing, arterial red of a deep wound.
"Guess I'll need a little something to tide me over," she hisses,
taking a threatening step toward him. Lloyd's wings flicker, muscles tensing reflexively. He barely realizes what he's doing before he does it. Neith lunges, and Lloyd jumps, his wings flaring, her fingertips just barely brushing past his leg as he's carried overhead. They beat once, twice, then blur as they flap harder and harder, propelling him forward faster than he thought they could. Neith snarls in annoyance.
"You can't be serious, you... Hey!"
She ducks out of the way as Lloyd careens past her, knocking over a lamp. Lloyd bobs up and down crazily, flying in wide circles as he tries to maneuver. He's only a few feet above the floor, threatening to crash into furniture with every movement. There's no time to stop, no space to practice. He looks up just in time to see his own fast-approaching reflection in the oncoming window, overlaying Estrella's horrified expression as she races back from the pool. His eyes widen, and Lloyd bounces off the thick glass, crumpling to the floor in a heap. The room spins, blurs, tilts. Above him, the ceiling recedes and stretches up, spiraling to impossible heights. Someone's shouting something, a name, but he can't quite hear it. Their voice is swallowed by a deep, tidal roar, and the room swirls away into the night. When he wakes, it all comes rushing in at once. Pain, a rhythmic throb in his skull, distant and suppressed, muted. Warmth against his cheek, chill air on his legs, his shoulders. Cypress and citrus in his nostrils, heady and pleasant, after the cold stink of iron and the copper tang of blood. Soft music, a song, someone humming a hauntingly familiar tune. Fingers brushing his hair, caressing and soothing. Lloyd groans and shivers, somewhat surprised to realize he's actually waking up. He grits his teeth against an agonizing stab through his head and starts to sit up, forcing his eyes open. A soft hand on his cheek gently pushes him back down, electric tingling spreading out from the touch. As it rolls across his skin, the pain simply drifts away. "Shh," Estrella murmurs. Lloyd's lying with his head in her lap, her hair spilling down over him. She smiles down, her eyes threatening to fill his world. "You're awake already?" She brushes his hair back, blinking slowly. His head buzzes from the contact. "Are you okay?" Lloyd groans again, a little more fear in the sound. Suddenly, the nostalgic music takes on a sinister cast. He starts to sit up, fabric shifting around him. Not the oversized hoodie, but... He looks down and his mouth goes dry. Lloyd's sprawled out across a plush, blanketed mattress. His jacket is gone, along with his shoes and his pants. Instead, he's wearing a sleek, short dress. Deep ebony and soft gold fabric flares out like a second set of wings around his legs. His shoulders left uncovered to show the real ones. His feet are encased in dark heels. A slim, silver chain, no longer than a foot or two, stretches between delicate shackles around his ankles. "Dead." Lloyd stops, looking nervously up at her as he gathers his panicked thoughts. "Did you dress me like this?" "Just like we always did. I loved picking out your outfits," Estrella murmurs, her eyes half closing. "This was one of your favorites. Don't you remember?" Lloyd tries to scramble up, but a gentle push on his chest sends him dropping back to the bed, his head spinning. "Or maybe..." Estrella starts, and all at once she's on top of him, pinning his wrists over his head. She's so frail, even more finely boned than he is, and yet with her staring down at him like this. Pushing her off seems utterly impossible.
Does this jog your memory?
Estrella whispers, leaning closer. Lloyd tries to stammer something, and suddenly she's holding his wrists with one hand, the other pressing down over his mouth. He can't look away. He can't even blink. The soft glow of her eyes burns right through him. Estrella lets out a soft, slow breath, the scent of citrus intensifying, and just as suddenly, she releases him. Clambering back, she huddles against the headboard of the bed. Lloyd stares in confusion as she looks away, her shoulders trembling and her cheeks flushed.
I'm sorry, Lyra.
Estrella grips the blankets, looking down.
It's hard to resist. You.
She looks back up. Lloyd pulls himself up and back, crouching on the opposite end of the bed, hunching to try and cover up his outfit. He looks down just in time to avoid losing himself in her gaze again. Out of the corner of his eye, he can see Estrella's mouth quirk in a sad, knowing smile.
You don't remember any of it, do you?
She sighs.
I didn't know. This would have been different if I had.
Lyra, Lloyd breathes out. Something about the way the name sounds is not familiar to Lloyd. Not necessarily, but there's something about it that tugs at his mind. Is that who you think I am? My name's Lloyd.
No, I know,
Estrella says, shifting closer. Lloyd tenses, ready to tumble off the bed and run, but there's no threat in her tone, just quiet certainty.
You're not her, or at least, not all of you. Not the parts that I want.
She reaches out, and he flinches, the chain jingling. But when she touches his wing, it's light and gentle as a feather. Her finger traces over the delicate veins and scales. I don't understand. Lloyd's voice cracks, and he hunches down, his wings folding away from her hand. I don't understand. You all keep acting like I should understand, but I don't. I'm Lloyd. I'm a boy. You abducted me. Your psycho candy vampire threw me in a cage. There's a moment of silence. Estrella starts to reach over, then lets her hand settle on the mattress. Finally, Lloyd coughs. So, he looks down at the floor, determined not to get drawn into her glow again, or let her see the look on his face. So, what are you going to do with me? Why'd you bring me here? Estrella slides off the mattress. She takes a few steps around until she's in front of Lloyd. He tries to spin away, but it's too late. Estrella kneels down, her eyes glowing softly. She lifts her hand, offering it to him.
I will explain what I can. Will you? Is that something that will help you?
Lloyd swallows, his hand staying in his lap. He can't look away. It's not washing over him like it had before, but the light is still commanding his attention. He lets out a weak chuckle. I mean, yeah. Estrella reaches out and gently takes Lloyd's hand in hers. He shudders, the radiance starting to flow through him at their contact. Warm, soft, intoxicating. Estrella's voice murmurs through the golden fog, echoing as if from a great distance, though she's right in front of him.
Lloyd, listen to me, and try and understand. You've done something, fused yourself with this human boy.
She goes quiet, looking down at his hand. Slowly, she massages his knuckles with her thumb.
I don't know why you've done this. I don't know why you left me. I don't know why you...
Her grip tightens and her expression grows misty. She grits her teeth,
trying to regain her composure. "But I do know one thing. I want you to come home. Lyra, my flutterfly, first consort of the Ebony Wilds."